Welcome back to some more Economica, the first episode as usual. So, where we last left off, well, according to progress when it comes to the virtual stock market, it's progressing a little bit. So, it's all good. So, let's continue reading. The peaceful Sunday passed by sleepily and slowly, just like the drops of water hanging onto the wash drying out in the sun. Perhaps turning points in people's lives are more likely to come crashing in on those days. Around sunset, I headed back to my room and turned on the computer to find that I had received an email. See what email we got. I had thought it was the usual stuff from the securities firms, but it was from the Ratzinger Economics Research Center. Oh boy. It hit me as if someone punched me directly in the heart. I opened the email to find a short message. We have received a message from one of the sponsors of the current investment contest addressed to you, Mr. Yoshiharu Karara. It was unthinkable that a sponsor of this contest would be anyone other than someone involved in the financial world. Oh my gosh. Financial world. Even though I was the only person here, I checked my surroundings. And then I gulped and sheepishly used my trembling hand to move the cursor to the download attachment button. Scouted. I frantically tried to downplay my expectations, telling myself that it was probably some recommendation for an investment product. Schrodinger Street. A financial district where lions, tigers, and bears gathered. It was the world of markets, both gorgeous and somehow wicked. Enormous assets only allowed for those who ran through those streets. The key to opening the doors to all my desires could be found there. The title of the downloaded letter was Sugnant, or whatever the word is, from Barton Clodwyson, head of investment fund, the Britannica. Throwing away all my doubts, I opened the letter. What I felt at that moment was something I never forget. I'd seen some of your skills from the investment data. I'd really like to meet you. And only that line was written brusquely. Brusquely, or whatever the word. It was haughty and upfront. It was just how I imagined someone living in the financial district would write. I pumped my fists in front of the computer. I felt like I was almost about to scream out in joy. I ended up conversing back and forth 3 times over email with Barton Clodwyson, manager of the investment fund, the Britannica. I was totally shocked at receiving a reply within 5 minutes of replying to the attached email address. There were people in Schrodinger Street with income so high that they make more than 100 mules in the time it took to pick up a 100-mule bill off the street. This speedy response, as of confirming my expectations, nearly made me piss in my pants. This was a feeling I'd forgotten. It was something very unlike the fresh scent of detergent. It was something born out of pretty much foregoing the bath for 3 months. I won't be needing dinner tonight. I wonder why. I said this during breakfast. Lisa looked at me surprised, and even Hagana looked at me. Oh, did you have plans? Going to go meet with someone? At my words, Lisa and Hagana looked at each other. A friend? Nope, I replied bluntly. I didn't want to tell Lisa and Hagana about Barton. It was my dream. It was the first step to a dream waiting for me. I see. Well, just don't do anything too dangerous, okay? Even though Lisa was talking like her usual self, this time it felt irritating. Like the usual mom in the house. There was no doubt Lisa was a grown-up woman, but she was not a grown-up man. Okay, then. She definitely wasn't the type to basically state her business over email to someone she's pretty much never met before, and she definitely wasn't the type to reply within 5 seconds. Newton City, with its buildings of wealth built up using arrogant steel frames, was not a place for women and children. I remembered their arrogance, and it's been a while since I thought of it. When will you be back? No idea. If it's too late, you get scolded by the police. I know already. Lisa sighed as if wondering whether I really got it. However, she didn't say any more. To start with, I was merely bumming a place here, and she was simply the owner of the place. She had no right to limit where I could go or who I could meet. Hagana, who had been sitting at the opposite corner of the table, shook a bit when I called her and looked at me. Is today's trading data ready? I'll send it. Hagana replied with some uncertainty in her voice. And then Hagana looked up at Lisa, and Lisa looked back down at her. I needed to hone myself and get rid of this soaking the day away in the bathtub feeling. I had an appointment to meet with Barton in a hotel in New City at 6 p.m. tonight. I couldn't afford to be lumped with all the sloths around here. I put all my concentration into trading. I'll be back later. I got up from my chair as soon as trading stopped, foregoing even my usual stretching. Hagana, who had been sitting next to me, was unable to reply as she watched me depart. I threw all my belongings into my bag, ran down the hallway, jumped over the pews, and hit the exit in one go. And then, when I opened the large doors, I heard a cry from the other side. Huh? Across from the doorway was Chris, standing there and scared to death as always. Oh, it's you, Chris. What's the... The rest of my sentence got swallowed up by the large old man standing behind Chris. Is Lisa here? He had a big gut, a great beard, and overalls on, the perfect example of upstanding laborer fashion. The hand he laid on Chris's delicate shoulders looked like rubber from all the oil and manual labor. Lisa, she ain't here, but should come home soon, I think. I see. Maybe you could wait inside? Oh, and Hagana's inside as well. I said those words to Chris and then dashed off. Chris was about to say something to me, but I waved my hands without turning back, dashing into the amber-colored streets. Oddly, I thought to myself, Chris wasn't carrying any baggage this time. That man behind her was probably her dad, huh? I was a bit curious about what they wanted, but in the end I didn't really care. I had to make it to the Royal Central Hotel in Noon City by 6. Taking the Lunar Development Railroad to Noon City wouldn't take more than 30 minutes. The hotel was super high-end, even on the moon, and thus could be reached with a few minutes of walking from the station. Even if I took it easy, I'd totally be able to make it, but I could not afford to be late. Furthermore, I was so pumped up, it was impossible for me to take a stroll. I flew, dashed through, and jumped, weaving my way through rush-hour traffic, and I managed to launch myself through the closing doors of one of the trains. The train of Noon City was crowded, but the trains I see from time to time going in the opposite direction were even more packed like sardines. Due to a lack of land on the moon's surface, a real house would be terrifically expensive. People wanted to save their money and not pay the ridiculously high rent in the White Belt, opt to live in the outer sections. Recently, some quite nice residential districts had been built in the outer sections, and redevelopment was proceeding. What remained was pretty much the area where Lisa's church was. The dome covering this lunar city started changing gradually from orange to deep blue in color, and the twinkling of stars started showing through. At these times, due to the kind of half-hearted lighting, you could see the traces of pipes and supports used to bring rain to the moon. From one side, you could see the orderly arrangement of buildings along the streets of the White Belt, and the orderly streetlights extended all the way across to the other side. The sparkling clean lighting from the houses made it easy to imagine a beautiful dinner on top of a beautiful dining table inside a beautiful house. After some time, the train started making a gradual turn, and I could start to see Noon City in the distance. Noon City at night was a sight to see, even more so than it was during the day. Yeah, you gotta love downtown, while it's all lit up in the nightlife. Was during the day. On Earth there was this phrase, $1,000,000 view, used to refer to places that had spectacular views at night. Here, this view was labeled as 100 million mool view. Shining into space like some star base, these tall buildings could only be built here, away from Earth's gravity. The space between buildings was dark like a vacuum, and the light flowing out of the windows illuminated the skyscrapers gaudily. I finally arrived at Noon City's central station, and it was more packed than usual due to rush hour. Most of the pedestrians were in suits. There were no signs of men in overalls with oily hands. There weren't that many people in rough clothing. You'd either have people dressed up in easily recognizable top-class suits, or you'd have people with messy attire and hair, but with the latest mobile terminals. In either case, you could tell they worked in some of the top enterprises that comprised Noon City. The remaining people were tourists who set out to visit Noon City at night. Following the route I had planned before heading out, I navigated the complex and meandering routes in the station. The biggest pathway spanning east to west inside the central station was adorned with gigantic ads, billboards for insurance, software, popular singers, cosmetics, investment banks, and emerald industries continued for as far as the eye could see. In front of those ads, you see smart and well-paid people in suits meeting up, talking on the phone or fidgeting with their terminals. Right above the station was one of the numerous shopping malls in Noon City. The ads gave away to shop windows, and eventually you could see an entrance with automatic doors. Passing that, you come across shop windows, ads, etc., that continued onwards. Mannequins that couldn't really be mimicking realistic human form wore gaudy clothing and looked down at the commuters, seemingly with disdain. People traversing the automatic doors held many large bags. In each bag should be merchandise worth at least several thousand, if not several tens of thousands of mules. Even the most expensive clothing from the store Hagana had haggled down with all her effort could not amount to even the sales tax on something that people here would buy to wear every day. Glancing at the scenery from the corner of my eye, I finally made it out of the building of housing the station. In front of me was an open space and a giant, dizzying hologram of a blonde girl, clad in a flashy outfit, dancing and singing, floated in midair. I jogged along the gently curved path towards the buildings on the other side. Automobiles weren't allowed up to the entrance of the station, but just a bit farther down were so many multi-layered traffic circles that it would have been a pain to count. They were filled with the headlights of taxis, buses, and limousines. The gorgeousness of Noon City at night was in full swing, and it was said that you could even see this from Earth with the naked eye. On the other side of the station were government offices and Schrödinger Street, whereas the shopping and entertainment districts were on this side. There were no trees like the ones randomly growing everywhere in the outer districts. There were only totally tamed trees lining the streets, and they themselves were lined with multicolored LEDs. It was quite laughable. Once you entered the area with shops for ridiculously high-class brands, the ground turned into stone pavement. The cars were also luxury vehicles imported from Earth. Cost to use the orbital elevator was determined by weight. Really? By weight? Now that's pretty insane. And products such as cars carried a ridiculously high tariff. Tariff or whatever. The moon didn't really have that expansive a network of roads, and even if it did, there weren't many places you'd be able to drop off and pick up passengers. Having a luxury car essentially amounted to raising a pet bug that ate away at your wealth. Around the shiny, polished red and yellow sports cars were thin women and men standing and talking. At times they'd notice me, chuckle to themselves, and go back to their conversation. I actually was in a position where I deserved being laughed at, so I didn't really care. However, 10 years later, or perhaps 20 years later, I'd be someone who could strut through these streets with his head held up high. I guess you might say, telling myself this was a product of my annoyance at the situation. However, a more practical reason for this was that I needed a certain frame of mind to go forth from here, the front entrance of the Royal Central Hotel. Oh. And now we are at the hotel. The Royal Central Hotel was owned by the king of hotels on the moon, Abel Zaiv. I had heard that it was a luxury hotel where rooms started at 1,000 mules and royal suites on the top floor were 20,000 mules a night. Damn, that's pretty expensive as hell. A night. There was a giant fountain in front of the entrance. Luxury cars constantly passed the path to the front foyer. Since this was also a great place for viewing the night scenery, it wasn't a problem if random people wandered in. Even though I knew this, I was somehow nervous. It was a bit late, but I would have preferred to have worn the hoodie I bought that time at the store, although I should have just bought something better in the first place. In a gigantic front foyer that seemed to intimidate anyone who came, doormen were lined up and tended to obviously rich guests coming by. What finally gave me some relief was that I managed to mix in with a bunch of tourists who had come up on the path to the foyer. The experienced doorman smiled as he opened the door to welcome the non-hotel guests in. Perhaps I was a bit nervous, but I felt that the doorman scrunched his eyebrows at me when I passed by. I told myself it was just my imagination. Wow, inside the hotel then. Entering the hotel placed me in a huge lobby, making me feel as if I had just been ejected into space. I thought it was quite fascinating how they managed to get such a huge space on the moon. Even if the room started at 1,000 moons a night, there were many guests lined up at the front counter. I looked at my watch, confirming that it was around 10 minutes before my 6 o'clock appointment. I didn't have the guts to simply walk around and browse, so I was regretting coming a bit too early. Coming early is no big deal. Gotta have time to prepare, at least. Just standing in the middle of the carpeted lobby, I suddenly heard a voice call out to me. Is there something I can help you with today, sir? I reflexively ended up jumping. I turned around to see a beautiful porter with a round face and her hair tied back. She was standing there, dressed in a classy uniform. Are you here for lodging? She asked me with a smile. No. I see. This hotel comes with many facilities for you to enjoy yourself. Would you like me to show you some of them? She spoke quite politely to someone like me, who obviously looked to be lacking in money. However, I finally managed to remember the reason why I came here. I wasn't some kid from Earth or the outer sections coming here to look around. I had to meet someone in the cafe on the first floor. I managed to squeeze my words out while sounding like I was hit with a bout of the hiccups. The porter lady nodded as if she'd received an important message, then smiled. Understood. If you'll please follow me. And then she escorted me politely to the cafe as if I were some important government official. Really? This is the cafe. Please take your time. At the end, she clasped her hands together, took a deep bow, turned on her heels, and walked away. Her mannerisms were exquisite. Furthermore, as soon as I was shown to the entrance of the cafe, a waiter who had been waiting by the entrance walked quickly up to me. Welcome. Are you here to meet someone? Huh? Yeah. How did he know? I puzzled over this while I saw in my periphery a party being shown to the cafe by a different porter. The porter, after showing the party the cafe, made a motion with her hand behind her back to the waiter. It was probably some sort of signal. Could you please let me know the name of the person you are meeting? Huh. Waiter. Oh, jeez. The name of the person. Yeah. I came back to my senses and looked at the tall, handsome waiter. They were all tall and slim, but he was gushing all smiles. He really enjoyed their work, or perhaps it was because he had confidence in his work, and thus he looked quite cool. But Barton Clodwyson. I struggled to somehow say his name. After I did that, the waiter looked shocked for a moment before straightening his stance and returning back to being all smiles. My apologies for my behavior. Please allow me to show you the way. Huh? I had wondered about his surprise at first, but I was more surprised at the fact that I only needed to mention the name. I've heard that they had to memorize the names of all the patrons who made reservations. The waiter led the way past the properly dressed fellows slowly sipping tea and farther into the cafe. Situated in a corner of the open space lobby, the cafe had no ceiling and had a feeling of freedom. However, the cafe sloped up the farther I proceeded, and there were seats hidden from view by plants and shrubs, which cleanly segregated various areas. Oh boy, this'll be a while. We walked upon the plush carpet that muffled our footsteps, past a fish tank full of bright red arowana, and then proceeded along a wall composed of potted plants with pretty yellow flowers. Finally, the waiter stopped and smiled. We have arrived. And then he turned to his side and said, The guest you have been expecting has arrived. The waiter must have been talking to Barton Clodwyson. My heart beat painfully. Oh, have him come over here. What I heard was the heavy, deep voice of a middle-aged man. Understood. Please go ahead. The waiter showed me the way, and I resolved myself to move forward. and then I turned diagonally to the left and peered into the segregated space. What I saw was a man in a suit with suspenders holding up his pants. His black hair was combed back all the way, and he was sitting on the sofa with a phone in his ear. Okay, sorry, gotta go. I got guests, so please just handle that. Thanks. Barton then hung up the phone, placed it on the coffee table, and then stood up straight with his hands on his thighs. Oh boy, it's big old Barton. He wasn't that tall, but when he stood up, it was as intimidating as as a whole mountain moving. He didn't have his jacket on, so the shape of his great belly could clearly be seen. A leading figure in the financial district. If I were to have drawn a picture using my imagination, it would have fit his image to a dot. And then, when Barton looked at me after standing up, his smile froze for a second. Man, am I surprised. He had quite firm features compared to his figure, but it wasn't something scary. Even his wide-open arms conveyed a generosity that made me feel like I was about to get hugged. Mr. Yoshiharu Kawaura. He spoke my name with a beautiful pronunciation, a sign of his wealth. I nodded and, not willing to be outdone, stared back at him right in the eye. Yes, Mr. Barton Clodwison. You can just call me Barton. You've done well, young investor. He suddenly stuck out his right hand. His sausage fingers, which looked almost fake due to their size, had not an ounce of oil on them. His hand was large, simple, and firm, without a ring to show his wealth. When I took his hand, he grasped back almost painfully, and then grabbed my shoulder firmly with his left hand. Your body's well built. Fabulous. Thank you. I usually spend half my time down there. When I shake hands with people who've always worked on the moon, I get complaints that I was about to break their finger bones. By down there, he must have meant down on Earth. Those who proclaimed that the moon was the vanguard of the human race would refer to the Earth as down there. I guess Barton was one of them. Well, take a seat, is what I like to say, but... Eh? I looked at Barton, and he smiled back. Aren't you hungry? You came right after trading ended for the day, right? I paused a bit before nodding. Well then, let's go have some dinner. That alright? Yeah. Actually, I traveled up from Earth today and arrived just a while back, and you know how the food on the orbital elevator is totally not suitable for human consumption. And so my email replies came pretty fast, right? Well, it was because I was bored out of my mind. He reached for his jacket, which had been thrown sloppily on the back of the sofa. I thought he was going to put it on, but instead he picked it up and threw it over his shoulder. Barton was quite dignified in a place for VIPs in the back of a cafe belonging to the highest class hotel on the moon. In addition, he didn't need to hand money or a credit card to the waiter when exiting. Thank you for your continued patronage and for choosing us. The waiter bowed as he spoke. There was actually something I really wanted to eat, but how about you? Is there something you like to eat? No matter how I tried to paint myself as a ruffian day trader, I had to behave myself in front of this adult, as I'd play easily into the hands of even Lisa. When I could only reply in grunts, Barton slapped his big hand on my back. Hey now, you concentrating so much on your stocks that you can't think straight yet? Your eyes are all stiff, you know? He didn't go on to point out that it was because I was nervous. He was broad-minded and kind, like an uncle. Well then, should we just go with what I like? Yeah, sure thing. I'd always have this when I was in New York, but for some reason, the stuff here on the moon is just tastier. Maybe it's like alloys, where the low gravity helps everything mix together. I see. I had no clue what he was talking about. Barton exited through the center of the front foyer. The doorman noticed immediately and signaled towards where all the black limousines were parked. Even if Barton took big strides, the limousine would arrive by the time he made it to the roundabout. Barton drew his chin down in satisfaction, handed the young doorman a 100-mule bill, and patted him on the shoulder with his big hands. First time in a car? He said to me when I hesitated even though the car door was open. Sullen, I got in swiftly. The car seat felt like it was about to swallow me up, and in front of me were a delicate wine glass and a small bottle of wine. There was even a car phone on the armrest. While I was dazed by the insides of the limousine, Barton shoved himself in through the opposite side, and the door closed elegantly. "To the Marie Biel, please." "Understood." The driver nodded at Barton's single utterance. "Shall I depart?" "If you please." "Understood." The car started to advance slowly. At the same time, a black partition separating the driver and the rear passenger seats started to go up. Once the partition fully reached the ceiling, Barton relaxed down into the black leather seat. This was a habit of mine from when I had my own personal chauffeur, or whatever the pronunciation. Eh? There was this time I got eavesdropped on and information had leaked out. I had thought I had given the guy not a bad pay, but in either case, let's just say that he received a pretty nice pension. Through the tinted windows, I saw the lights outside flow by, as if mystically caressing Barton's face. He turned to me and laughed at me boldly. A cutthroat financial district filled with desire. I couldn't even chime in. "Man, I sure was surprised at how young you were." He spoke with oddly precise timing, so as to prevent the situation from settling into silence. Barton doesn't even look that middle-aged to me. Huh. Settling into silence. "You didn't know?" "Yeah, no personal information appears anywhere in the data provided by the investment contest. The only thing that showed up was your handle name for the contest, Hal. I had totally thought you got the name from some satellite system, but apparently you got it from your real name. The name of your investment fund, the Britannica, is that where you're from?" I somehow managed to direct it back to him. "Oh, nope. I just like history. I especially like the Victorian era. The Britannica comes from Pax Britannica. Doesn't it sound like something that could definitely collect riches?" "I think it sounds really cool." "Yep, sounding cool is the most important. The day you named the fund the Siberia Fund would be the day your investment performance froze solid." Exchanging body gestures, Barton talked in high spirits. The car gradually made its way through the many bustling streets of Noon City. The pedestrians were all well-dressed, but I wondered how well-dressed they seemed to someone who'd ride around casually in a limousine like this. "But man, you really are young. How old are you?" 16. "I see. I'm 52. I see. 16, huh? 52? You look younger than that, according to the art." Barton repeated the word 16 to himself a bunch of times, then, straining against the seatbelt, turned towards me. "When I was your age, I had glasses that were as thick as the bottoms of milk bottles, and I do silly things like deliver milk. Of course, I invested all my earnings, but I see, I guess one doesn't like to age." Barton murmured to himself, eyes shut. I realized it was kind of hard for me to respond when he suddenly shot his eyes open. "I saw your investment data. Marvelous stuff." Thanks." "Oh, don't be so shy. Amongst the stated 50,000 investors, you're around third or fourth, right? That's a great achievement." "But I'm still far off from first." "Yep, that is true, but it's not really something you should be worried over. Mr. Trochet, right? He's from Earth, got an MBA from Harvard, and it's been unofficially decided that he'd be starting at Platina Smith. He's been called a once-in-a-decade genius over there. Don't worry about it if you can't beat him right now." When Barton said that, I was a bit surprised. How did he find all that out? The financial world is a small world. Information about those who strut the tried and true path naturally gets around. Usually those guys have all been lured away by the big players dangling lucrative compensations in front of them. How much do you think Platina Smith would pay for an MBA brat in his mid-20s? I I ended up quoting a high compensation that I had heard somewhere. 300,000 moles, perhaps? Close. A salary of 200,000 moles. Even I thought it was probably a bit high, and Barton corrected me. Plus, the bonus is probably at least 200,000 moles. If he does well, that'd go up. Beyond that, he also gets five free rides on the orbital elevator in first class. Riding first class on the orbital elevator. It's so ridiculous that I never do it out of pocket. How much do you think a one-way ride costs? I couldn't even imagine. I shook my head and Barton chuckled. One person, one way is 500,000 moles. You could build a house for that much. Man, that's a lot for an elevator. Oh, geez. 100,000? And 5 rides would total 2.5 million moles. Oh, God. It's really easy to lure people from Earth using privileges on the orbital elevator. Besides, they'd surely all get annoyed of it and stop riding it. Barton laughed satirically and continued. And thus, the nameless rookies get called on by us minor guys. Sorry for not being staffed from the personnel department of Platina Smith or E.J. Rockberg. There was no way I'd be complaining about this. I shook my head hurriedly from side to side, and Barton broke out in laughter, leaning back. Ha ha ha! Well, it's not so bad being with one of the little guys. If you got promoted with Platina Smith, you'd find yourself mired in all sorts of internal politics. I really can't commend them to any guys aiming to do a lifetime of trading. Oh, really? Yeah. Once you survive 5 years on Schrödinger Street, you'd earn all the money you'd ever need to live on. Beyond that, you really have to consider what you want out of life to pick the next step. If it's power or fame, you'd aim to be the partner of a major investment bank. Those junkies who'd get all engrossed in making money wouldn't join any organization, like me or perhaps. Barton narrowed his eyes until his eyelids paralleled the horizon at dawn. Like you? Oh. There's no harm in calling out to people with promising futures. Didn't I say I saw your investment data? The way you gambled in the early stages was especially great. It was when I couldn't depend on Hagana's program at all, and I had to use my gut instincts. Indeed, it appears that I was the first to contact you. The reason were those trades. Eh? Organizations hate people who'd bet everything on a single stock. Even the small-tier funds would have second doubts. Those who take big moves win big, but they also lose big. Furthermore, they also have big attitudes. Barton opened his mouth wide and laughed devilishly. Many people think playing with fire like that was a privilege of the boss. They're all bratty hotshots who got big just like that. As for me, I love doing foolish things with those reckless guys, and they like me for that. The lights outside brushed past his face, and Barton shot me a glance with narrowed eyes. I thought to myself whether this feeling was what girls felt when they've been successfully hit on. Well, we can continue this while we eat. We're here. The car made a gentle curve and stopped in front of a restaurant. The doorman opened the door promptly and Barton got out first. After a few words, the doorman nodded politely and sent a small message via a transmitter on his sleeve. As expected, Barton didn't need to explicitly pay for the limousine. I realized what it truly meant to have a reputation. This place has some great meats. Steak? Well, the steak sure is delicious, but didn't I say I loved history? If it's about what guys in suspenders eat in the good old financial districts, there's only one thing. Barton had his jacket on his shoulders as usual, and even though I wasn't really that well dressed, we were both greeted with the utmost respect when we entered the high-class restaurant. So, what are we going to have? Steak tartare. Barton answered me like a kid. The meal was, to put it simply, delicious. There was no other way to describe it. Barton ordered without looking at the menu. effortlessly requesting one item after another. He drank a lot of vodka from shot glasses made from crystals suitable for jewelry, and laughed out loud after telling me that it was a great vodka because even the pros wouldn't be able to tell the difference in taste between different types of vodka. After I had said that I never really had any alcohol before, I was given some soda. Although the appetizer berry liqueur I had was sweet and delicious. Steak, steak tartare is a simple dish made by mixing raw meats with various ingredients and pounding it, and it felt appropriate that it'll be a favorite amongst the quick-tempered and large-minded men of the financial district. We talked a bit about investments, but there was a lot of conversation on personal manners. He asked me where I lived now, whether I went to school, and what I was going to do in the future. No matter how lightly you put it, Barton had totally won me over. It was probably only that he wanted to keep close by a freak who had attained such investment performance at a young age, but for me it was as if I had died and gone to heaven. However, there was only one phrase he didn't say. Would you like to come work for me? Hmm. Well, that was a very decent experience so far. So, next part, we're going to find out what happens next after we had a long talk with Barton. So, like, comment, and subscribe, and see you guys later. Have a good day.